It is June 2026. The war in Ukraine is in its 5th year, and the lines on the map have barely moved. To break the gridlock, the conflict has entered a phase of intense, daily aerial bombardment. On the night of June 2nd, the scale of that bombardment reached a new peak. Russian forces launched 656 drones and 73 missiles at targets across the country in a single night. In Kyiv, apartment buildings were hit, and families were forced back into crowded subway stations and underground shelters for the night. 6 people were killed in the capital alone. The strikes reached further into Dnipropetrovsk, killing 16 more people and wounding dozens of children. By the next morning, the national death toll for a single day of strikes stood at 22, with over 130 injured. Ukraine is absorbing these hits because its ability to defend its own airspace is under extreme pressure. They are currently losing more ground in the sky than they can afford. The anti-air interceptors that protected Ukrainian cities are running low, and the traditional resupply lines are failing to keep pace with the rate of Russian fire. Much of this shortage stems from a geopolitical distraction. The United States, Ukraine's primary weapons supplier, is currently focused on its own conflict with Iran, leaving Ukraine's defense stockpiles to dwindle. Russia is exploiting this gap by deploying the Orushnik, a hypersonic ballistic missile that flies at speeds current Ukrainian systems are not equipped to intercept. With the traditional defensive shield exhausted, Ukraine's military leaders have pivoted. They are moving away from a purely defensive posture and launching an asymmetric offensive. Instead of waiting for the missiles to arrive, Ukraine is now using long-range drones to fly over the front lines and strike deep into Russian territory. The first goal is to starve the Russian front. By targeting the nodes that facilitate transport, roads, railways, and fuel depots, Ukraine is attempting to cut off the supplies of ammunition and fuel before they reach the battlefield. Second, these strikes are designed to pin Russian troops down. When logistical hubs in the rear are hit, Russian commanders are forced to redeploy soldiers away from the front to protect their own infrastructure. Third, the strategy targets the Russian economy directly. Drones are reaching oil refineries and industrial sites located hundreds of kilometers away from the fighting. Vladimir Putin has maintained a domestic narrative that this is a clean, distant operation. Plumes of black smoke rising over Russian cities make it difficult for the Kremlin to maintain that image of control. On June 3rd, Ukraine demonstrated the reach of this new strategy by hitting St. Petersburg, Putin's hometown, located 700 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. This satellite view shows the result. A major oil terminal in the city's port set on fire. A nearby naval base was also targeted in the same wave. The strike hit just hours before the opening of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. This is the showcase of Russia's economic resilience, where Putin presents his vision of a stable, prosperous future to international investors. The damage was significant enough that Putin broke his usual silence on such setbacks. He told international news agencies that Ukraine's drones are indeed breaking through, and admitted that Russia's air defenses need improvement. It was a stark admission for a leader who has spent years touting the S-300 and S-400 systems as some of the most sophisticated defense networks in the world. Putin's public acknowledgement confirms that Ukraine has found a gap in the Russian armor, and they are now exploiting it systematically. As the drones were hitting St. Petersburg, President Zelenskyy launched a parallel psychological strike, a personal open letter addressed directly to Vladimir Putin. In the letter, Zelenskyy proposed direct, face-to-face negotiations in a neutral country. He explicitly ruled out the use of intermediaries or any meetings held in Moscow or Kyiv. Zelenskyy included a warning, noting that Russian history is full of examples of leadership change, occurring when the public grows tired of a long, costly war. By releasing the letter during the Economic Forum, Zelenskyy ensured that foreign billionaires and business leaders were reading about Putin's military vulnerabilities at the exact moment Putin was trying to project strength. The Kremlin responded by dismissing the offer of a neutral venue, insisting that any negotiations take place in Moscow, a condition Ukraine views as a non-starter. This has led to a diplomatic gridlock. European efforts to mediate have been rejected by Russia, and with the United States focused on the conflict in Iran, there is little international pressure to force a compromise. The war has entered a new phase. Russia maintains the advantage in manpower and heavy missiles, but Ukraine has developed the capability to strike the Russian heartland at will. The focus of the conflict has moved beyond the trenches of the front line and into the industrial and psychological interior of both nations. With a military victory currently out of reach for both sides, the outcome will depend on which side runs out of willpower first.